Hey y'all, how you doing? Hope everything is going well for you this morning. Welcome to Q&A number 3, and hopefully we don't have the train wreck that we had last week at the beginning of the live stream. Having to bounce around back and forth through several different screens, it gets kind of funky, and trying to get everything together and make sure I've shut off everything that I need to shut off can sometimes get a little bit rough. So, hope everybody's having a good Sunday. This morning's video was all about vector selection order, and I I was asked the question in the last live Q&A about how to maybe change the order to make the toolpaths move in a more logical direction. And you have to remember, I'm a home hobbyist, and I thought that would be a good idea because I see this question come up a lot. But I'm a home hobbyist, I'm not a production guy. So shaving off a few seconds here and there isn't really all that important to me. And I got one good comment, real good comment, from someone who I see out here in the chat right now, George Chambers. He left a comment on the video that said, I've been trying to play with the order of cut for years and finally came to the conclusion that it's not worth the time to mess with it. Looking forward to the live thing at noon. Thanks for the video. George, you're absolutely right. I'm in the same position. I was asked directly how to change that order, so I showed how to change the order. But being a home hobbyist, if I'm cutting a clock face, I don't really care if it takes 15 minutes or 15 minutes and 20 seconds. So I can afford to take that time. Now, on the other hand, if I've got a big sheet of material laid out there and I've got to cut 75 of the same thing, 10 seconds times 75 parts, that does equal up. That does add up, rather. And, it's just a decision that you have to make based on your situation. Nobody else can make that call for you. It might be worth your time to go through and check the running order, especially as I laid out in the video. If you're cutting out a bunch of cabinet parts or something like that, the ability to pull one completed side off and get to edge banding and then finish sanding and get it stacked on a cart to move over towards finishing while it's cutting the next side, that's worthwhile. But when I'm cutting out, V-carving a sign or something like that, I really don't care if it takes me, I don't care if the bit hopscotches around. It may look illogical to me, but it doesn't really matter if I finish it up in 10 minutes or if I finish it up in 9 minutes and 50 seconds. But still, the point was someone asked the question, and I thought it would be a good idea to get it out there. So if anybody has any questions at all on it, now's the time to bring them up. Oh my goodness. JP Woodwork just threw in a super chat for £2 towards my 10K party. Yeah, I'm creeping up on 10K. And Jamie, you were my very first super chat. Thank you, my friend. I do appreciate that. I don't bring up super chats much at all. In fact, I don't think I've ever mentioned them before. But you're my very first. Thank you very much. Let's see who else we got out here in the chat while I'm looking over in that corner. Mr. Dave Gatton himself, CNC Builder to the Stars. David Crook, Bob Heltebridal, one of the funniest guys I follow on Facebook. This guy is fun. He see Thomas Grimm says he's getting 2 sets of audio. Have you got me opened up in 2 different windows? I'm monitoring my feed right now, and I'm not hearing any echoes. But anyway, Bob Heltebreit will post some of the funniest stuff on Facebook. If you're not following him, check him out. He's good. George Chambers, David Krause, Thomas Grimm. Oh my gosh, JP just threw another one. I'm your second super chat too. Well, Jamie, I usually try to wrap these up in a half an hour, but if you're going to keep doing this every 2 minutes, we can keep going, Thomas Grimm in the house too. Oh man. I also want to give a shout out. Like I say, I don't bring this kind of thing up simply because I don't know. I just have this internal starch blocker to keep me from doing this kind of thing. But if you look down in the description box on top of the line, the top line is something that's added by Streamlabs OBS. And that is support the stream, Streamlabs OBS. It's a link there, and you can click that. And if you are into that kind of thing, you can make a donation to help support the channel. And I got my first donation on that last week by somebody who calls themselves, I think it's Slayer Man. And he hit that Streamlabs donation button, and I wanted to say thank you very much for supporting the stream. You were my first donation on Streamlabs, and do me a favor, you know who you are, jump in the contact us link on my website, marklindsaycnc.com, and just shoot me an email. I'd like to talk to you. I do appreciate that. So... let's see. Okay, Thomas Grimm said yes, he had the feed up. He had the show up both in Facebook and on YouTube. So that's why he was getting a little bit of a echo there. And thank you for letting me know about a 10-second delay. Now I know that there is about a 10-second delay between Facebook and YouTube. Haha. Yeah, it could be a marathon show, Dave. It could be a marathon show. So we had a few people join a little bit late, and I kind of recapped the discussion about changing the order in which certain parts are machined, and the vector selection order and things like that. Bob Heltebreit has a question here. Do you think that if you change the start node for multi-parts, you could force the order? Yes, it depends on which toolpath you're running. If you're running well, let's see, just about all of them offer vector selection order. And profile toolpath also will allow you to, it gives you the most options. It will let you start at vector start points. Different toolpaths have different options available when it comes to vector selection order. And the point of the video was to kind of let you know that while you can do it, you need to make the decision if it's really worth your while to do it. Because as I said before, I'm a home hobbyist. So I'm not in a high volume business. I'm not really concerned about production time because I don't do a lot of production work. If I have one clock face to carve, I have the time. I really don't care if it takes 15 minutes or 14 minutes, 50 seconds. But again, if I'm cutting 75 of something, then yeah, I do want to shave down that time. And that's when it becomes important to try to save as much time as possible. If the bit is up out of the material and moving, it's not making you any money. It's only making money when that bit is in there actually cutting away material, whether that be on a 3D carve or that be on a profile or a V carving or something like that. So you want to try to keep that bit down in there as much as possible. But then again, you have to balance that out, because if it's only saving you 3 seconds, is it really worth going through the extra 20 minutes to prepare the vectors? Maybe, maybe not. Most folks do their designing kind of sort of at their leisure, quote unquote, off the clock, unless it's a real complex design that you have to charge for. But that's a judgment call you're going to have to make yourself. Yes, you can go in and change the order, but as a home hobbyist, I tend to really not even look at it. I don't even bother with it. But since I was asked the question, I figured it's a good time to give the answer. Anna B. Workshop with a super chat. Thank you very much, Anna B. I really do appreciate it. Thank you very much. Wow, this is cool. Okay, David White, thank you for your suggestions about the latency. I will check it out. I'm going to have to dig into it in the YouTube streaming settings. And David White also wants to know, are there any optimization programs for G-code? You know, that's something I haven't looked into. I got to admit, I'm pretty bad with G-code. I know what a few things mean, but I've never sat down and taken the time to really learn it, and I probably should, because I know there are some things in the G-code that could probably be cleaned up, things that I don't really need, but I don't know enough about it to go in and tinker with it. And again, as a home hobbyist, I really don't have a need to go in and take care of that. I mean, I know I probably could get in and, you know, I have my home position set to a certain level above the material when I turn on the router and it moves over. I could probably change a few things so that that home position is different from the rapid move, and maybe I want the bit to retract a little higher in one area of the material I'm cutting, and to clear something. And if I knew how to get in and edit G-code, I could change it for that area, meanwhile leaving the retract height lower for the rest of the material, where I want it to just pick up and move quick. But until I learn a little bit more G-code, I'm not even going to attempt something like that. And as far as any optimization programs, if anybody has any suggestions for that, I'm a willing listener. But I don't know of any, David, and that's just simply my ignorance. I haven't looked for any. There may very well be. So do we have any questions at all? Okay, this is a big one. Daryl is asking, how does one download a 3D file for from Etsy? I've had that question. There's been a sudden flood of about 5 different people asking me, how do I download a 3D file from Etsy? I'm going to have to go ahead and do a video on that. I'm working with someone in the background to allow me to show his Etsy shop and go in and download a file to show how to do that. But basically put, the file you're going to download from Etsy is a what's it called? It's a zip file, but that is a compressed archive file. And all that is it compresses the 3D file into a small enough size that it can be downloaded easily. That's called a zip file, ZIP. Once you download that zip file to your computer, you have to decompress it. And basically, if you're using a Windows based computer, you right click on it. One of the menu options is extract all. And you will extract that file. It'll ask you where you want to put it. And you put it there, extract it. Then you can import the STL file, the 3D file, into VCarve or Aspire. But a lot of folks are trying to import that zip file directly into VCarve and Aspire, and that's not how it works. You have to extract that file from that compressed format. So I will be doing a video on it. As I said, I'm working with someone behind the scenes, and as soon as he gives me a yes or no around about showing his Etsy shop in a video, I'll be able to get in and do that. So thank you for the question, Daryl. Okay, William Devlin, off topic but on time saving. Do a rough outcut in a 1/2 inch boundary around the perimeter of the piece before doing a final finish cut. Haven't done it yet. What you think? If you're talking about machining a 3D piece, do a rough cutout, 1/2 inch boundary around the perimeter before doing the final finish. That kind of goes back along to, boy, Anna B. A second. I just noticed that big blue panel. I thought it was the same one. Anna B. Did another one. JP shouldn't be the only one. Okay, bidding wars. There we go. I love it. As far as the 1/2 inch boundary around the perimeter of the piece before doing the final finish cut, you can try that. That kind of dovetails in with offsetting, drawing the vector boundary around the 3D model and then offsetting out a little bit. I have found, spoiler alert here, when I did this wedding plaque for my friend, and I'm just waiting on the finish to cure. When I did this wedding plaque, I did go around the outside and set a boundary and offset outwards for it because I wanted the 3D carve to overlap the pocket that I carved down here and around this side. And I should have made it a little bit bigger. If I had it to do over again, I would have done it a little bit different. I would have made that boundary a little bit bigger. And that's simply because the ability to get the sander down in there to sand where those two overlap. And overall, I think it turned out real well. My friend seems to be very happy with it, and you saw it here first. So that's going to get shipped to him in a few days. As soon as the finish cures enough, I can wrap it. But let's see. JP Woodwork says Team Scroll Saw or Team Lathe. I would have to say Team Lathe because I think, just my opinion, scroll saws are for people who don't know how to program a CNC. But that's just my opinion. I just started a fight, and that's my job. It's what I do. Okay, I see what you're saying, William. Doing a 3D roughing versus doing a 3D cut without a roughing. I didn't bring it up during those videos, but not everybody uses a 3D roughing toolpath. Yeah, JP just got it. Not everybody uses a 3D roughing toolpath. If you are using a tapered ball nose, where you've got the small point and the bit tapers up at like a 3 to 5 degree angle, and it has that spiral cutting edge along the whole length, usually about 1.25 inches, something like that cutting length. You don't need to use a roughing toolpath because the angle of that bit is going to carve away the material outside of where that ball nose is touching, and it's going to make that clearance for you. It's when you're using a bit like a 1/8 inch ball nose, especially with like a 1/4 inch shank, so you've got that step down from the shank down to the cutting edge, where that little bit of shank might hit the material. That's when you'll need to do a roughing first. It's not so much to clear away the material on top of the 3D model. It's more to clear away the material to the sides of where that ball nose is going to hit. You know, it's it's basically to keep you from breaking bits and burning up material. So if you're using a tapered ball nose, you don't necessarily have to do a roughing toolpath. But if you're using standard ball nose bits, I would highly recommend a roughing toolpath. So let's see. David White asked, "Have you ever LUA to program Aspire scripting capabilities?" No, I have not. I've not delved that deeply into it. There are some absolute wizards out there who are so deep into LUA programming and scripting and things like that. That is so far over my head, it's not even funny. And you also have to remember that in the great grand scheme of things, I'm still fairly new to Aspire. I've only had it a few months. I've been using VCarve for a while, but Aspire, not so much. So I'm still getting into it. Let's see. Another off-topic question from Barry Curtis. The blue screen set from Big Tex, is that link still active? I will hit you up in a private message on Facebook about that, Barry. I saw your post over in the Gatton CNC. It'll be later on this evening, but I will hit you up on that. So there are a few things you have to do to get that installed and get it running correctly. And unfortunately, Big Tex isn't really supporting it much anymore himself. I like that screen set. I use it. There's just a few things you have to do to get it set up. So, but I'll hit you up on Facebook. Okay? Look for a PM from me later on this evening. So, let's see. Are there any other questions? And I see people are still giving Jamie a ration in there over my scroll saw versus CNC. You know what? I've always looked at scrollers as more like artists than anything else. Some of the stuff, some of the stuff I've seen Jamie do, oh my God, that leopard. And then the portrait of the queen, that's art to me. And I am not an artist at all. I know you don't need patience to do anything you love, but that's one of those things that I just do not have the patience for. I couldn't do it. So when I see something like that, I'm like, yeah, there's a little bit of jealousy in there. So when I can throw Jamie under the bus a time or two and kind of sting him a little bit, I'm going to do it. So let's see. Jim Hester has a very long, but Bob Hiltebridle starting to dig my way out. Jamie knows I love him. So I better love him. He's going to be visiting soon. Jim Hester, Part 1. I pretty much agree that the small savings in time aren't that big of a deal for a hobbyist like me who's in no hurry. Good point. In your last example in the video, the savings was about 3.5%. Yeah, it's just, to me, it's not worth it. So for an all VCarve file, I've estimated the VCarve to be 119 minutes. The technique would save me 2 minutes and 42 seconds. Yeah, I'm with you there, Jim. You have to balance out and decide whether that's worth it to you for the extra amount of design work that you're going to have to do. Part 3, but I have a few things that I make copies of pretty often, so the idea of less wear and tear on the machine does become beneficial. Yes, Jim, that's absolutely correct. The more time that bit spends in the material making chips, the better. You're right about, what was it, save 2 minutes 42 seconds. If you're if you're making a bunch of them, it might be worth it to you. If you're not making a bunch of them, it's a judgment call on your part. There are some benefits into changing order. Because, as I said before, if you're cutting cabinet parts, the ability to get one cabinet side off the machine while it's cutting the second cabinet side and edge band it, sand it, and get it ready for finish, I mean, great. That's a benefit in and of itself. You know, we all say, oh, we don't stand around and watch the machine. We're doing something else while it's running. Well, having something to do while it's running is big. So there's a lot to be said for that. Let's see. Thomas Grimm. Sometime could you explore the relationship of layers, light bulb versus selection of the screen icon for the layers in the layers tab, vector selection for tool paths. Yeah, the vector selector function at the bottom of the toolpath detail. Yeah, I'll get into that. That I've avoided that simply because that's kind of outside of the scope of the beginner series. That's a more advanced topic, but you're absolutely right. It is valid, and I'll get into that a little bit more. What he's talking about, folks, is the ability to more or less separate your artwork into various layers and then associate those layers with tool paths. So a tool path is cutting everything on one layer, and another tool path is cutting everything on another layer. And there is the ability to do that, and it is beneficial. But I'll get into that in another video. It will go on the list. Okay, John Horgan wants to know UGS or Pixender. I don't know. I've never used either one of them, and I'm not trying to be flip. My personal choice is Mach 3, but then again, it's the only thing I've ever used. What I would do is I would hit some of the support forums for like the Shapeoko, the XCarve, the oh my gosh, what's the open source one? I can't remember the name of the open source. Oxbuilds, any of those support forums and see what folks are using and talk to them about them. I have seen Universal G-Code Sender. I didn't like it. I prefer Mach 3. That's what I learned on, and it works for me, so that's what I'm going to stick with. So, on topic, vector selection order come into play in things other than flutes. Where else do you use these? I've never really used the vector selection order on a 3D or a 2.5D like with the molding tool path, which is another subject I will get into in a video down the road. I haven't really gotten into using the vector selection order for those, so I don't know how they would affect them. I know there's very little effect when it comes to 3D carving. If you're putting a boundary, a vector boundary around a 3D model, you can select the start point of that vector boundary, and that'll sometimes keep it from the bit from lifting up over to your home position and moving way over to the top right corner of the material and starting a carve up there. But other than that, it doesn't really save much. So my ultimate point in making the video was to show that while the toolpath the software calculates may look illogical to us, it may seem ridiculous that it VCarves the first two letters in a line of text, then jumps up and moves up to another area. There is, generally speaking, a reason it does that. And it might be because the direction the vectors are running. It might be because when you go from the letter T, where it starts in one corner, moves over to the top, comes back, goes down, up, and then squares off the corners, it's faster for it to lift up and move to the letter above it than it is to scoot all the way over to an O, to the center of the O, and then carve that out. The software knows to try to optimize, and you might be able to shave a few seconds off of the runtime by getting in and playing with vector orders. But, you have to make the judgment call. Is it worth it to you? So that was my main point in making this video this morning. So Thomas Grimm, you can even have tool paths consisting of vectors selected from multiple layers. Yes, you certainly can. You certainly can. And you can choose, do you want to carve just the closed vectors on a layer, or just the open vectors on a layer, or just circular or ovals. You can really break it down and get into a whole bunch of things if you have certain processes you need to do in between cuts. So, can you set the vectors so the flutes cut one direction only? Seems to make a much better cut one way. I don't know if I understand you correctly, David. Are you talking about climb versus conventional cutting? Because generally speaking, every bit, if you're cutting conventional in one direction, if it moves up, it's going to cut climb in the next direction. So, it's, and then if you're talking about V carving like a letter O, it's going to carve to the outside of the O, then it's going to move in and carve to the inside of the O. It's going to go in the opposite direction because cutting outside versus cutting inside, a climb will go in opposite directions on the outside from on the inside, if that makes sense. So, George Chambers could have something to do with inertia and machine speeds. Exactly right. I mean, we try to run real fast feed rates, but also acceleration and deceleration come into play, because if you have your feed rate set at 100 inches per minute and your acceleration is 4 inches per second to go from a standing stop, it's at 4 inches per second, it may or may not ever get up to that 100 inches per minute if you're V carving something. So, and then it's got to slow down to stop. So you can set speeds and feeds however you want to, but if the software can keep the bit in the material and cutting as long as possible, I say let it do it. David, okay, said right. He only wants one direction. That may or may not be possible because, as I said, a conventional cut around the outside of something, the machine is going to move in a different direction than a conventional cut on the inside of something. So, if you mean drop in, make a pass, lift up, move over, come back in, drop, make a pass, then move over that way, basically you would be doubling your machining time, and is that really what you want to do, is what I would say. Basically what I did was I practice in scrap and tried to learn from every project. For instance, I learned that when you're 3D carving, if you're carving in a softwood, I run perpendicular to the grain so that I'm actually cutting across the grain, because if you go with the grain, it's going to peel, split, and chip. Most dense hardwoods, or excuse me, most medium density hardwoods, I run at a 45-degree angle to the grain when I'm 3D carving. On a dense hardwood like a hard maple or hickory or something like that, pecan, I'll actually 3D carve with the grain because it's easier to hide machining marks. The grain obscures machining marks. So, but yeah, it's just something that you have to practice in scrap and learn the limitations of A, your machine, B, your router or spindle, C, the bits, and practice, learn, and see what gives you the best results. And keep notes. Take notes. Nobody remembers all this stuff. I got notebooks all over the place. Write it down. Leave notes. Take notes. Make checklists. So when you go to cut some aromatic cedar, you can pick up that and, oh yeah, okay, that was what I set it at, you know. And it works for me because, you know, I'm 58 and the memory bank ain't what it used to be. So I don't trust this memory. I have a hard time remembering what I had for lunch yesterday. So, oh man. Oh, Jamie, Jamie, Jamie. You know I love you, man. Yeah, the scroll sawers don't like the CNC comments. That's funny. So, David White, as far as conventional and climb cuts, good video out this week on the Stepcraft channel showing perfect cuts in foam by using conventional with the foam cutting tool. Yeah, that's Eric Royer. Eric Royer's a good guy and he knows his business. He knows what he's doing. In fact, he was cutting very soft foam, making a darts case. And the bit he selected, I didn't even know existed. I'm getting one because I have a couple of projects coming up where I'm going to need to cut some foam rubber. That's a very good video. Look up Stepcraft on YouTube and check out Eric's latest video. Eric's a good guy, and he knows his stuff, as I said. So, okay, looks like we're kind of winding down on the questions. Does anybody have anything else about vector selection orders or anything I covered in today's video? At all. And I'll wait and let the chat catch up and partake in a beverage as I do. Ah, just like Grandma used to make. So, no questions. I'm going to try to keep these live sessions to somewhere around a half an hour because I know folks have things they have to do. I'm cutting into shop time. So, anything you want to know, just hit me right now. Nothing? Nobody? Okay. Well, then I guess we'll go ahead and we'll wrap this up. Number one, thank you very much to Jamie Page, JP Woodworking. Scroll up, find his comment right there, hit those three little dots right next to his name, and subscribe to his channel. As much teasing as I give him, the guy really, really knows what he's doing. And he's good. He's ding-dong good. Annabee Workshop, the same thing. Get over there and hit her channel. Subscribe. I'm going to be trying to contact her because I may have a concrete question or two. We'll see what happens. Mancrafting TM in the house. Holy cow, I just saw you popped in. Tool changes. Do I try to avoid them? No, I don't try to avoid them. Tool changes, there it's just, par for the course. You got to do what you got to do. I use a touch plate. Let me throw that out there. If you are planning on doing tool changes, it behooves you to go ahead and get a touch plate. They're really, really worth the effort. They're worth the money. You can make one yourself for just a few cents. I mean, a piece of aluminum, a little bit of wire, a banana plug or a alligator clip, kaboom, I would look up, if you're using Mach 3, I would look up Guru Brew. Steve did a very good job of showing not only how to make the touch plate, but how to install it and get it to run with Mach 3. You can Google your operating system or your controller system, whether you use UC CNC or you use Linux CNC or whatever. There is a way to hook up a touch plate to just about every controller software. So if you're doing tool changes, I would highly recommend one. You you once you set your X and Y 0, you should not have to change that at all. The only thing you're worried about is your Z0. And a touch plate makes things so much easier. Joni Jensen, I was watching your video on tramming. I'm going to try it next week. Is there anything else I should know? Yes. Bring a beverage, have a sandwich on hand, and patience. It takes a while. Patience. Mine took about 4 hours. So just be patient, but do go through it. It does make a difference. George, I'm going to scroll up and look for your question. You said I didn't answer it. How about, could you do me a favor, George, and repost it? Oh, wait, I think I know your question from before. You were talking about how in the 3D model, when I set that 30 thousandths, let me pull up a 3D model in Aspire and we'll get right on it. Let's see, I do have Aspire. Let me open up that sign. And now, as soon as this file loads, we will go over to this here. Let me switch back over to YouTube real quick and make sure that this does switch. It should. Okay. Go over to my toolpath tab here. You're talking about in the 3D roughing toolpath, I set a machining allowance of 30 thousandths of an inch. And you're wondering, when I got into the preview and I previewed that roughing, let me preview that toolpath. It'll take it a second here. You're wondering why it didn't go down all the way and leave just a 3/4 inch, or excuse me, 30 thousandths of an inch skin over the model. Okay, are we about done here? Boy. That's the one. Okay. Boy. There we go. Okay. I don't think this is the model that I used. The 30 thousandths machining allowance. Now, if you look down here at my Z readout, that's the surface of the material. That is 1/8 of an inch down. That's 1/4 of an inch down. And then down here, we're about a 1/2 inch down. That 30 thousandths of allowance, that simply means in the areas that the bit is going to go down and cut into, it's going to stay 30 thousandths away from the level the model is actually sitting at. And it's not going to get any closer. Because in the 3D roughing toolpath, I'm using the Z level roughing strategy. The bit is not going to come down in here to get closer. It may be able to machine more away right here to leave that 30 thousandth skin. But because I'm using Z level, it's going to use the depth of cut I have set for that bit and plunge down to that level and carve. It's not going to go any further. If, on the other hand, I used 3D raster, it would follow the contours of the model and leave that 30 thousandths allowance. The main reason for that 30 thousandths allowance is just to tell my roughing toolpath not to get any closer to the model than that. It may not get this close, but this is basically telling it don't get any closer to the model than 30 thousandths. I hope that clears that up. That was one of those that was just a little bit of a sticky question. I mean, did that help, George? So, man. Let's see. Man, I did not mean to start the whole scroll saw argument. Okay. Yeah, that may be the model, George, but I made about 4 different versions of that model before I settled on which version I actually cut, because I was down there playing with the machine times on it. And, like, for instance, the wedding plaque that I showed a little bit earlier, that started out as a 14-hour 3D finishing cut. So I had to keep shrinking it down, and I eventually got it down to 5 hours. So, phew. Okay, JP, got to take off and go set up the podcast. JP Woodwork is 1/4 of the Makers International podcast. If you don't know what that is, look for them on YouTube. They'll be going live in about 15 minutes, which means I've been on here 15 minutes too long. Hit up the Makers International podcast. It's worth your time. Let's see. And they have Carl and Robin. Carl and Robin Jacobson. Two fun people. Joni Jensen, do I do these live chats every Saturday or do we have warning? Joni, I do. I release a video almost every Sunday at 7 a.m. Eastern, 4 a.m. Pacific. Then at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, I do this live Q&A about the video I released. Now, those of you on the East Coast know that this morning the video didn't go live at 7 a.m. And when I got up, I couldn't figure out why my video wasn't live until I went over to YouTube and saw that I had accidentally set it to release at 7 p.m. So it was a couple hours late. Attention to detail. Again, notes and use them. So, but yes, I do them every Sunday, 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific, and the topic is, generally speaking, the video that I released that morning. So if you are not a subscriber, now's the time to look down below the video pane and hit that subscription button, and then hit that little bell right next to that subscribe button. Then you'll get a notification 30 minutes before I go live, then another one when I do go live. So, with that, I want to thank JP Woodworks. I want to thank Anna B's Wood Workshop. Hit the 3 dots over there next to their names over there in the chat, and subscribe to their channels. Go check out their content. Dave Gatton, if you are interested in anything, and I do mean anything CNC, hit the 3 dots next to his name here in the chat. Get over there and subscribe to that channel. Then binge watch. The man does a live show every Saturday. He does giveaways. He has excellent topics. He has excellent guests. Dave Gatton is my Obi-Wan. I would not be doing anything CNC if it weren't for that man right there. He is the master. He's the guru. So I had never been in the same building with a CNC until I met Dave. Hit him up. He has forgotten more than I've learned. Okay. Yes, he does, Javi. You ought to check his channel out. All right, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. I want to say thank you to everybody for checking it out. Thank you for the super chats. Thank you for the Streamlabs donations. Thank you for checking out this morning's video. And thank you for joining me for this live Q&A. I'll see you next Sunday with another video. Y'all take care.